So the first thing I did when I got home from watching this movie was I checked how old Tsuchiya was. She's 19. There's a chance for me. It's not creepy. Not creepy. Rurouni Kenshin, Kyoto Inferno is once again directed by Keiichi Otama and stars everyone else from the first movie, including Takeru Sato again as Kenshin Himura, and now we have a few more additions. We have Tetsuya Fujiwara as Shishio, Ryunosuke Kamiki as Sojiro, and Tao Tsuchiya as Misao. So in Kyoto Inferno, Kenshin is called upon by the government to help them stop a rogue former assassin, also from the Edo period, much like Kenshin was when he was Batusai. And this assassin's name is Shishio, and he was deemed so dangerous by the government that they tried to burn him alive. But apparently he survived, and now he's amassing an army, and he just plans to overthrow the Meiji government. Now, like I said in my previous video, I am a fan of the Rurouni Kenshin anime, but I don't remember anything from it at all. But if there's one thing I really do remember, it's the fact that Shishio is such a cool, menacing villain. Like, in the coolest anime I've ever watched, he's probably the coolest character. And I think Shishio was so popular among the fan base that the main story arc that followed the Shishio arc, like, no one really liked it. Like, no one I've ever heard of really enjoyed that last story arc. So for me, it makes sense that these movies, this trilogy, is ending with Shishio. And the cool thing about Kyoto Inferno is that it was filmed back to back with the third installment, The Legend Ends. But we don't have to wait an entire year for that. That movie is coming out later this month, actually. So I think Kyoto Inferno is still showing in cinemas up to now. So please try to go watch it, just so you can watch The Legend Ends. Interestingly enough, though, I more or less have the same opinion for this than with the previous movie. Like, for me, I have like the same praises, the same complaints generally, but I do think Kyoto Inferno is just a bit better. So this movie's vision of the Meiji era is still very crisp and still very colorful. The cinematography is still fantastic. I think this movie is much darker than the first one in terms of both tone and visual look. And in this movie, they actually have some really great CGI. Like, obviously, all the stunts and stuff, they're still practical. But near the end, it's not a spoiler, but there's a giant boat at the end. And when I saw it, I was like, this looks like Hollywood. It's great. And again, just in terms of like production design and stuff, like there's just so much to look at. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the first movie, most of it took place in Tokyo, if I'm not mistaken. And Tokyo and Kyoto, for me, in this movie at least, they kind of look the same-ish, but there's a subtle enough difference in the production design to really kind of separate the two, so you know you're in Kyoto, you're not in Tokyo. And again, the costume design is just as faithful as ever, while still remaining kind of realistic and grounded. Especially Shishio. Like, I was so surprised that they actually got the look of Shishio right here. He didn't look like an anime character. He didn't look like a guy who was just kind of dressed up as a mummy. You could kind of believe that this dude has been burned all over his body, and he looks super scary. Like, I love the fact that he like, for first time viewers, 'cause I was watching this with some people who didn't really watch the anime, he was really scary. In my opinion, the plot of this movie is much more focused than the last one, because the last one, it really was kind of obviously them trying to put together certain scenes and story arcs from the anime and the manga, but now here it really is just like on one track, like we just have to stop Shishio. This movie does end on a really annoying cliffhanger, but I would actually forgive that for this instance. Very special exception, because the third installment's coming out so soon. So, I kind of understand why they had a cliffhanger, and I still kind of felt fulfilled anyway after everything had happened. Because the plot is more focused, I feel like the theme of Kenshin's dark and violent past it's a bit deeper now. It's explored better, I think, because in the first one they kind of touch on it and then they just kind of forget about it for a while, then it comes back at the end. But here, I really do kind of feel it running throughout the entire thing, and for me, it's just such a great theme. He's just trying to escape this violent person he was, but everyone else just wants to see that violent person return so they can get their revenge or whatever. And it's great how Kenshin's dark side really contrasts itself with Shishio's dark side, because Shishio has never gotten out of that dark side. Like, he just wants violence all the time, and it's such a great, interesting dynamic between the two. And Takeru Sato as Kenshin continues to be great in this role. He doesn't have as many light moments because, again, this movie is much darker, but he's able to play those dark moments and anger in a different way from how he played them in the first movie. So it does feel like there was growth in this character between the two movies. Tatsuya Fujiwara as Shishio, even if it's the first time we're seeing him on the big screen, he is instantly just memorable. Like, again, like I said, he's just really scary. And it's great how Tatsuya Fujiwara is able to convey like this menacing persona, even if you don't really see much of his face, and even if you don't really see him in action at all in this movie. And as for the other two actors I mentioned at the beginning of this video, Ryunosuke Kamiki and Tatsuchiya, you really understand where their characters are coming from. Again, they don't really have as much screen time obviously as Kenshin, but you can tell that there's something kind of off with Sojiro, and you know he's a kind of villain that I love to hate because he's so annoying. The way he's just smiling all the time, the way he's just beating everyone up, and it's great to see him play that well. And Tatsuchiya as Misao is both, you know, extremely adorable, but then she has her own toughness about her, and she has her own little backstory. And in terms of Keiichi Otoma's action directing, I actually think he's a better director of action in the first movie, because I feel like the first movie's fights were more focused, they were tighter, but here I can kind of understand why they're kind of a bit sloppier, because the scale is much bigger. You know, he directs much bigger fights here, and for that, I'm kind of willing to forgive that. Especially when you see like the big Kyoto fight that happens at the end, with all these multi fights happening, all these small face-offs in the middle of this gigantic encounter. Shout out also to the fight between Kenshin and Sojiro, which was amazing, and the fight between Aoshi, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but spoiler, he's in this movie, and the old ninja guy. Like, that was a really great fight also. But what I love about what Keiichi Otama does with this movie is that you really feel like something is at stake here, and not in terms of like the Meiji government being overthrown, but the fact that kind of like Kenshin's soul is at stake here, his morality, and I really like how we're able to see that. And more you forget that this is an anime adaptation. Like, it really just feels like this is a Japanese period film. But again, like I mentioned, I do have some complaints again about this movie. For one, I feel like the beginning is really, really rushed. Like, they're just trying to get Kenshin off to Kyoto as fast as possible. And the middle kind of slows down a bit while it's trying to kind of just build its world. The tension kind of deflates for a while. Aoshi, whatever, he's just completely shoehorned into this movie also. Like, whenever it cut to him, it's like, who is this guy? Why do we care about him? And he doesn't really make a difference in this movie at all. They're just trying to set him up for the next one. And unfortunately, the old gang, like Sano and Kaoru and Yahiko and Megumi, like, they don't get any screen time at all. Like, and there's never enough time for us to see them, like, how they've developed since the last movie. So they do kind of just stay these flat characters. And you know, I just can't help but feel like there could have been more, there should have been more. You know, if I wish they hadn't ended it with a cliffhanger, although I understand why. But still, I wish they could have kind of brought it together so this movie could have been like a real standalone thing instead of just the first part to the two-parter that is, you know, these last two movies. But despite that, Kyoto Inferno is still a really, really good movie. You actually, in my opinion, don't really need to watch the first one to understand this one, because it's very kind of different. But you know, still watch the first one definitely. And again, this is like the only foreign film franchise that'll come out in this country and be like huge hit, because this movie is like number one. It became number one first week here, and I think it's still like racking in money. And it's great that the wait won't be long for the next one. I'm sure that'll be a big hit too. Hopefully, we get even more like foreign films here when, you know, other countries see how well Samurai X is doing here. Alright, so that's my review for Rurouni Kenshin Kyoto Inferno. Have you guys seen it? What do you think about it? Whether you loved it or you hated it, whether you agree with me or not, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation.